Okay, so just before we start into security in .NET, I just want to quickly go over our sort of our schedule, the last few weeks of class, and yes, it really is getting down to the last few weeks of class. It is crazy. And also, for some of you, this may be your last few weeks, period. So anybody who's graduating, anybody who's finished this term, I think today is the deadline to put in your application, your request to graduate, which if you're finishing, you want to do, because they won't let you come to convocation in fall if you haven't filled out the form. And if you're going to graduate, well, you may as well graduate with the other people who you've been in school with for 2 years. Otherwise, you're going to have to go to a convocation later on where you're not going to know anybody. Okay, so technically, there should be, so we're here on the 15th. We should have 5 weeks left of class. We only have 4. I am not going to be around the last week. I'm going to be away that week. So I think what we are going to do, I've removed the presentation component from the project, okay, so you don't have to present. What this means is the final exam is going to be that week instead, okay? What I'm going to do, here's what we're going to do for week 14. There's no class, so what I will do is I'm going to make that a lab amnesty class. So if you have any labs you didn't do, I'll give you a chance to redo them with a 20% deduction. So you can still get a 2 out of 2.5. Well, if I let you do it for the full marks, that's unfair to everybody who did it on time, right? What's the message to everybody who met the deadline if I'm going to let you do it 3 months late? Okay. So if you've done 4 of the labs and you've got 2.5% on all of them, you can forget about it. But if you have any lab marks to make up, I will let you redo any lab you skipped to a maximum of 2 marks per lab.
That's pretty nice. Thanks a lot.
Okay. So that's instead of, and then, so you can take that time to do any labs or study or finish up your projects in your other classes. Yep. Any of the labs you missed, I will let you redo them. I want them by the Wednesday night on the last week. Okay, so you need to give them to me by the Wednesday night of the last week, and you'll get a maximum of 2 marks for each one that you do. Okay. I don't want you to redo ones you've already submitted, but if there's ones you didn't do, it's a chance to catch up and get a few extra marks. Okay? Well, I only count, James, I count your best 4. So if you bombed one, don't worry about it. Just do well on 4 of the others, and you'll still get a good lab grade. So today we're going to deal with authentication and security. I guess we are about a week behind. So we're going to deal with authentication today. We'll deal with exception and error handling next week on the 22nd. And then that'll leave us one more class. We might look at, I think we'll probably can do a couple things. We'll look at AJAX a little bit. That won't be a full class. We can also play around a little bit with Web API and look at building a .NET web service, okay, where we can accept JSON data or send out, stream out data from our SQL database in JSON format. And then the exam will be the final week. Okay. So that's, pardon? Well, like, do I expect you to be doing handsprings and cartwheels out of here and throwing bouquets of flowers at me? Not particularly. I don't usually expect that. If there's less than 3 people crying when I leave, I figure the exam is fair. That's how it works. Less than 3. You will also need to give me by the final exam if you are planning on taking the yes, I exercised during the term bonus marks. I want that stuff by week 13. Okay, so you. Can we even know that again? Pardon? How that works?
Well, you've seen your own time, so you know, right?
Well, some of you I've seen you in there a whole bunch of times. So it was 1 bonus mark if either I see you in there or you log that you've been doing some kind of exercise at least 4 times over the term, okay? If you build it as a .NET application, I'll give you an extra bonus mark. Okay, so up to 2.
So this is a workout?
2%.
If you see me in there 3 more times, I get a bonus mark.
Have you seen me in there now?
All right, the people I know I've already seen. You, Jacob I've seen like about 50 times. I've seen you and you, Tyler, I've seen you once. I've seen you two in there a lot. Keith, I've seen you in there a lot. So everybody else either isn't going or you're on your own schedule. Or you're on your own program.
So you gotta see us at least once?
4 times.
You've seen me 4 times.
I've seen you 4 times.
How many
Okay,
times?
so I will put a submission on Blackboard. I'll put a submission link on Blackboard. So you have to do one of 2 things. If I've seen you in there for your 1%, you just have to submit and say, yes, you've seen me. If you want the second bonus mark, you have to give me a link to your application, your little tracker. Okay. And if you've done something else, well, there'll still be a submission spot on Blackboard.
Can our application just be like a GIF of people on this?
I'm taking marks off if I get that. You actually lose a %. Okay.
It just has GIFs of you all the way down.
Yeah. So I will make a submission spot on Blackboard, and those are bonus marks. Okay, so what I want to do today, what we want to look at doing today, because you do need to do it for your assignment, is look at how do we implement authentication and security using ASP.NET. So for starters, I want you to take 3 minutes, quick brainstorm, make a list of all of the pieces, all of the things we're going to have to hit on today in order to secure our application. So just make a quick list, use a Word document, use an Excel file. What are all the pieces we're going to have to put in play for authentication? You got 3 minutes, starting now. And yes, Patrick, even though you're late, I've already seen you 4 times in the gym, so you've earned your 1%.
Nice.
Sam, I gotta get that. Sam, why are you slacking the tree game, pal? Get wrecked. When was the last time you went? 2 weeks ago? Yeah, no, like a Monday.
Okay, your 3 minutes are up. So tell me one thing on your list that we're going to need.
Can I just submit this or something?
This is max login attempts, maybe?
Okay, so we could track login attempts. We don't have to have that. We could. Ben?
Hashing their password?
Tyler? Yeah, why do we want a timeout?
If they leave or it has to be like an extremely private platform like banking.
Yeah, so if someone walks away from the machine without logging out, we don't want them to stay logged in indefinitely. Blake?
Enforce a secure password, like upper lowercase. I hate that comparison right
Okay.
Ben, okay?
Jacob?
CAPTCHA for signups, so you get no bots.
Okay, we could use CAPTCHA. Yep. Sam?
We needed like some sort of session going in the background? To start our...
Yep, session management.
Possibly added status.
Okay,
Access level?
so potentially we have roles and permissions. We may or we may not, right, depending on how sophisticated of a security model we want to implement.
Maybe have it so when you type in the password, nothing even shows up. You're typing it in, it's kind of like logging into like a Linux or something. You don't like see your password. So if someone's watching your screen, they don't even know how many letters. Okay.
You could do that with CSS, right? All you have to do is make the color of your password box white.
Yeah.
Just make the color and the background color the same. The user's not going to see anything. That'd be a pretty easy fix with CSS. Is that?
You are going to get it, but it did not store any of the information cookies on the machine.
Okay, so we may or may not use cookies.
Cookies are used. This cookies are
We'll also want, so this is most of our list. Anything else we need? we probably also want to be able to secure files or directories. .NET has a really easy way to do this. Once we set up an authentication system with ASP.NET, we can actually manage access through our web.config file. So we can take any page or any directory and we can control who has access to it. So this way, when we create a new page that's private, instead of putting a security check on every page like we did in a PHP application, all we have to do is drop it in a folder, and we can specify in web.config that folder is private. That way we can keep adding new pages as long as they're in a folder we've deemed private. Users are going to be forced to log in. So it's scalable. So these are most of the things we're going to use. So Microsoft's given us a package to handle all this stuff. So really, security deals with, there's really two parts. Authentication and authorization, which was a question on the midterm I gave you last summer. What's the difference between the two? Right? So what is the difference? They're both involved in security. Tyler?
Authentication is being a valid user and authorization is having the right permissions to use service.
You got it. So authentication is all about identity. Are you anonymous or do we know who you are?
What is SHIP?
Is it a name or
It's a name. And authorization is, now that we know who you are, what are you allowed to do within the scope of our application? So in your assignments, you don't really have to get into authorization. You don't have to have different levels of users. Now you might, and looking at some of your sitemaps and diagrams, some of you have planned to have that in there, which is fine. The .NET Identity package will handle that. But we're primarily concerned with authentication. So in your application, basically, you'll have a public splash page and you'll have register login. Everything else has got to be private. So there's really a few different ways we can do this. If we were building a super simple application, let's say for our own use only, we're going to obviously be authenticating through some kind of, usually through some kind of login form, but we actually have a few options. If we only want one user account, you could actually create the credentials in web.config. You could just hard code a username and password in there and check the values in web.config. That's like the simplest option. Obviously, that doesn't really work for a real-world application. So typically, we're going to store our credentials in SQL Server. If we were building an intranet where all our users already had network accounts, it's also set up that we could use Windows authentication, that anybody who has an account on the network is automatically authenticated with our .NET application. Obviously, any application that's published on the internet, that's not going to work. We're not going to be assigning network usernames and passwords to anybody who wants to use our account. So basically, the .NET package, no matter what we use as a credential store, it's going to create a ticket, which is a type of cookie for managing. And then if you get into authorization, which we probably won't have time to get into today, if you're using authorization with different roles in your assignment, you'll be using some of these objects. There's an object called a principal object, and one principal can hold many roles. So at the time a user logs in, not only are we going to check, first we're going to check who they are, check their username and password, but once we know who they are, we then will have to check our credential store and see what role or roles does this user belong to. And as they log in, we'll want to attach each role onto that user. So as they travel through our application, we not only know who they are, but what are they allowed to do. Ben?
Is that kind of the same as the roles on like SQL database? Like we set up different roles for people with information to clear?
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, by default, when we create a SQL database, we're put in the DB owner role. So we have full control to create, modify. What many web applications do, would probably be good practice actually, is we usually often have two roles in the database. One that's the owner that has full access, and then we have another role where the user can create, read, update, and delete, but can't make changes. And we usually use that account in our web.config So it's only, so our web application can only create, read, update, and delete data, but it can't change the structure of the database. That way, if someone hacked our web server, if they got the credentials used in our web application, they could change the data, but they couldn't delete or actually change the database themselves. They couldn't do things like drop a table or rename columns. Okay? So it's very much like that. I mean, we even see it in Blackboard, right? We're all authenticated users if we're all logged in and looking at this page, but based on our role, I get these little drop downs here. You don't get them because I'm in a faculty role and you're in a student role. So on this page, there's a whole number of checks that's checking, okay, this user's authenticated, otherwise we would send them back to the login page. They never see this page if they were anonymous. But even within here, there's all kinds of checks based on what the user's role is. Even this section here, this little layer, is invisible to you based on your role. It's visible to me. If I was a Blackboard administrator, I'd have all kinds of other options that neither you or I can see. So I've just put a couple links up here. This is a bit of background about the ASP.NET Identity Library. I'm just going to touch on a couple points. I'm not going to bore you and read through all of it. A couple relevant things. So when .NET first came out, they really didn't have this much infrastructure for security. You basically had to code most of it yourself. And then that was in .NET 1. In .NET 2, they came up with a system called ASP.NET Membership, which was basically a very kind of rudimentary login, authentication, and authorization scheme. But it was pretty simple. So they've kind of evolved this over the years, and back in 2013 they did a complete overhaul. They renamed it, and they came up with the name ASP.NET Identity. Okay. So originally with membership, it only ran on SQL Server. You couldn't use any other kind of data store. ASP.NET Identity is more flexible, so you could run it with other types of data stores. It also uses this middleware, which we're going to use, which is called OWIN. You can get a description here. So OWIN is a security middleware. We can use it on any .NET platform. It doesn't have to be web. It will work for desktop, mobile, API development, any of them. It also includes things like OAuth 2 and external identity providers such as Facebook, Google, and Twitter. All this stuff is baked into it, which is great if you want to enable a Google login in your application. The code library is already here. You basically just provide the a token ID and it works. So one system for all of the frameworks. It allows social media, works with Azure and Active Directory if anyone's played around with it. And it's it's basically a plugin. So we're going to use the NuGet package manager to install the plugins. The plugins we need will add about 10 megs worth of overhead. It's about 10 megs worth of packages that'll get added.
Are we working on a new project or?
No, in fact, what I would suggest is work on your lab, right? Your lab is the most up-to-date version of our Contoso application.
We just build upon our most recent updates.
So I would suggest just take your lab file. Sorry?
We didn't do the last one.
If you didn't do the last lab, then you can, I haven't done mine, so I'm going to work on my lesson 9 files.
10?
No, I think last week our files were lesson 9.
Well, I named mine lesson 10.
Okay, so whatever you call, if you did the lab, then you'll want to work with your lab solution, okay? If you didn't do the lab, then you can work off of either my files or your files from class last week. Your files would be better because they already contain your credentials, right? If you grab mine off Git, you're going to have to redo the credentials. Okay, so they've kind of given you a walkthrough of how we do it. So the main packages we're going to need are these: the identity core. It will also require the identity entity framework and the identity OWIN package for the OWIN middleware. So we're going to be adding those. They've given us some sample code here. And this is kind of how this works. So we're going to need, we already have Entity Framework 6. So we're going to be adding these 3 packages in green: Core, Entity Framework, and OWIN. And then later on, we're also going to need some of these other OWIN packages that will bring in OAuth, cookies, and some of the others. There are a bunch of related dependencies. All in all, it's about 10 megs worth of dependency packages. So you're also going to need all of these packages in your assignment. Okay, so they kind of describe what each of these does. So what we're going to do is we're going to take either your lab solution or your files from last week, or failing either of those, you can take my files from GitHub from last week. I'm going to make a new project for today. Now, if you're feeling ambitious, they've actually got what I figured was actually a better lesson on this than I could give you. So basically, I'm just going to kind of do a walkthrough of their tutorial. They walk us through step by step how to implement all of this. There are a couple of tweaks to this that I'm going to make. If you're feeling ambitious, you can go ahead and the link's right here on Blackboard. You can try and implement the whole thing by yourself if you want in your own solution. I'm just going to kind of do it as a walkthrough. So they start with a brand new application rather than starting with a brand new app. I'll start with my files from last week.
We're just saving it as a template and then reloading it, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to open up my solution 9 from last week. I'll export it as a template, and then I'll create a lesson 10 solution for today. Okay, so you may want, if you did lab 3, I suggest take lab 3, open it, export it, create a new one called lesson 10, and we'll go from there. Okay, you can grab my solution off of GitHub if you want. As I said, if you take lab 3, then your code will be more up to date than mine because I haven't implemented all of the requirements for lab 3 in mine. I should do that. I haven't had a chance to yet. Just while my Visual Studio chugs along, I sent an email out to everybody yesterday, although probably only a few of you read it. This is the time of the year where I get a lot of students wanting to come for help because all of my classes have their big assignment due. So what I've done is create a office hour sign-up sheet, okay? Because what happens is I wind up having 5 students come at once, and then people stand outside my office for an hour waiting. Okay, and I also have had students try to sit beside me and do their whole project while I sit beside them, which isn't really fair to other students that are waiting. Okay, so if you want to come to office hours, just book an appointment. I've got additional hours in addition to my posted hours on there, so just book a 15-minute slot. There's a sheet for this week and there's a sheet for next week. Okay, so if you want to come, just sign up, so that way you won't be waiting when you come, and that way also I can see more people that way. Okay. Also, they're kicking us out of B125 at the end of this week, so I will be, the computer studies office is on the ground floor of A in A155, which is a long way away for all of us. That's how it is. If I can find a temporary office space for the next couple of weeks in B building, I'll look around, but I've got to get out of B125 at the end of this week. So I'm just going to open last week's solution and export it. Again, don't forget, if you grab my files off Git, you have to put your login in the web.config. This is, yeah, this is lesson 10.
Which I'm gonna need some help later on. I'm just gonna do the book or something.
So our solution, I've got a lesson 10 one running. So right now, it's about 32 megs. So it'll be about an additional 10 megs once we finish adding in all of the packages we're going to need. Okay, so what we want to do, where we're going with this today, this page will be public. Actually, let me see if I've actually published my Monday solution. That would probably be better. I could show you. Did I even publish it? Azure. I may have the Monday solution online. If I do, that would be better to show you what we're doing. I can push it up there, just take me a second. So our home page should be public. This navigation, we are going to want to hide. So when a user's not logged in, they should get basically a register and login link. And once they log in, then they're going to get a log out link and get these, right? So we'll have two versions of our nav bar, one with some private controls, one with some public controls. Just open up Monday. I can publish this quickly.
Monday red?
We downloading?
Not yet.
Not yet, but we're about to.
Fully forces there now. It's probably manual.
Pretty gutty to do that.
See some guys down the road. Wait, is it in neutral or blue?
I'm just publishing the Monday one so we can see what we'll have working by the end of class. So make sure your solution's up and running. And I also suggest you open on Blackboard, go into the Lesson 10 folder and click on this ASP.NET Identity tutorial. Probably a good idea if you have this open. Okay. All right, I'll just run it locally. I don't know what it's doing. Okay, so here's the result we're going to want today by the end of class. So when we load our home page, our only options are register, log in. If I try and load any of our other pages, oh, we haven't handled 404. So I tried to go to admin students, I get kicked back to log in. Now when I log in,
You get a return URL and everything.
yep, it shows me. So now I get a sort of a main menu page.
Ah, very nice. Very good, very good.
My menu changes at the top. I've got log out, register, login, disappear. Okay, so this is what we want our application to look like and function like before we get out of here today. Okay, so we're here, that's where we're going. So the first thing we need to do is we need to install some of these packages. So in Solution Explorer, if you right-click the project and choose Manage NuGet Packages, we're going to search for the word identity. This says identity.e. We should just be able to search for the word identity. So go to Solution Explorer, right-click, and there's an option in the middle, Manage NuGet Packages.
So some are missing, should I restore them? Some NuGet packages are missing from the solution. Click restore.
Yeah, you can do that. So make sure you're not in the installed packages section. Make sure you're in the online section. And then up here in the search box at the top right, just type identity.
Install the top one and it installs the core for you.
Yeah, if you install the identity entity framework, it has a dependency on the identity core. We need both of them. So installing this first one, it will say it also requires identity core. So accept the license. And now it'll show you that both of these are installed.
Rich, what about entity framework?
We already have that, so you don't need to install just entity framework. It's the identity entity framework one that we need. Now there are some other ones we'll need later, but I'll just kind of follow along in the order that they do things here. Okay, so we can close the package manager. So if I jump back to our list, well, somebody mentioned CAPTCHA during, Jacob, you mentioned during registration, right? We'll maybe leave CAPTCHA out for now, but we certainly need a registration form. Okay? So our registration form, pretty simple. Okay, folks, build away. So build a quick registration form, just call it register.aspx. This is what it should look like.
What though? I said to me, yeah, that's good. I got like $5 on that shit tonight. Yeah, I'm gonna delete it.
I suggest you guys work on your form or you're going to be very far behind very quickly. Yes, Sam, Tyler, and Patrick, I'm talking to you.
Yeah, I know.
You should also have a compare validator that checks that password and confirm are the same value.
The login page, register page. Should probably get on that, you have a username?
So here's my new form. Looks much like my Monday form. Okay. So I've got this compare validator running. Make sure you write an on-click handler for your register button. Right now, when you click it, nothing will
Did
happen.
you change the master page, or haven't you changed it?
I didn't change the master page, no.
Register.
We will need to put the link. There's no link to it. I just went directly to the URL.
Oh.
We will need to put a link in the master page, yes.
What kind of styling do you use for that? Like how they're lined up so nicely?
So I use this class around the divs and that class in the label tags, and then it all aligns. Okay. Remember, you need text mode equals password on your second and third inputs. And then we need a compare validator with the operator of equal, where we're comparing txt password and txt confirm. If you named your controls slightly differently than I did, no problem. You don't have to rename them. I'm going to do one other thing here. I want to also put a label at the top of the form in case there's any kind of error when the user tries to register. We can print a message back to the screen. So up above my username, I'll create one more group. I'll call form group large, so it's wider. So I'll call this LBL status. Let's see. Just go to Bootstrap's documentation for a minute. I should just make this page my home page. Seems like I'm here every day. Hey, Sam.
How you doing? The template you uploaded, does it have all the old stuff too? All the work that's done so far?
Yep, it has. So it has everything.
So what's it called?
Aside from the lab stuff.
Oh, you're trying. It'll be take lesson 9 Wednesday. So I'm just going to put this label on the top, so if we encounter any error when we try to register the user, we can print the message into that label and it'll show up in red. Right, so we don't see it. That'll give it a red background, so the user will be sure not to miss the message. So what we want to do now is we want to write the code in our on-click event that's wired up to, we're going to have to wire it up now to talk to the ASP.NET Identity package. So this just basically, they've walked us through building the login form. We don't need to do that. So the first two things we need on our register page are we need these two references in blue added. We need to reference the two packages we've put in the solution. So Microsoft ASP.NET.Identity and .identity.NA framework. So these two references have to go at the top of our page. The order of the references isn't important. They can go below the existing references or they can go above. It doesn't matter. So identity package references. So reference the identity package. And the identity entity framework package.
When you reference identity, wouldn't it automatically reference the entity framework as well?
No,
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
it doesn't. Because each one of these can have a whole bunch of dependencies,
Okay.
and we don't want to reference all their child dependencies if we don't need them,
Okay.
right? It's a good question. So we'll add those two references. And it doesn't matter what order you can put them right at the top of the page. They can go underneath the existing references. Doesn't make any difference. So now we're going to use most but not all of this code. So let's look at what happens. So on their click button, they're using a constructor of their user store class. So they're initializing a few instances here. A user store, a manager class, and then they're creating a new user from our username field. So they don't put in the password, we don't pass in the password yet. We create a new user and pass in the username from our text box. And then you notice the method that gets called from our user manager, it calls a built-in, so all of these are built-in functions to the identity package, calls manager.create. So it takes the existing user, and then it passes in the password, and it gives us back a result. So this result is a Boolean. Sorry, this result is an object. It has a succeeded property, which is a Boolean. So if the result succeeded is true, in this case, they're just printing a message out to the screen. Otherwise, the result also has an errors collection.
Are we just going to take this?
We're basically going to take this and modify it just a little bit. And it will print out, this code is designed to print out just the first error message, right? If you wanted to print out all the errors, then we need to use a loop. We need to iterate through the errors collection and concatenate each one on. Their code is designed just to show you the first error that happens. So let's grab this code. I'm just going to copy everything that's in their click method.
Create user vectors or click. What's that?
That's like our register button click. So we're going to copy that
So on click.
and put it into our own on click.
So when we create a new event, and set it.
Now we're going to run the code like this at first, and then we're going to wind up tweaking it. So the first thing is, we've got 4 errors here we're going to need to correct. These should be pretty easy to correct. How do we fix them? Yeah, we just have to rename the objects. So we're going to prefix this with txt, and I'm going to change my uppercase n to lowercase. So that gets rid of those 2 errors. We should probably take a look at what exactly is available in the user manager class. So if I hit the dot, we can see all of the properties and methods. So we can manage logins, claims, passwords. We can add a user to a particular role for authorization. We can change their password or phone number. We can delete them. We can find based on ID, name, email. So this class, somebody suggested, so Benedict, you mentioned this earlier, right? Locking them out. We can set in the manager, there's a property, max failed attempt, so we can set that.
Does that check like the ID of the?
I think so. I think that it
Or
does.
is it based on the user?
And where's this code?
This is all part of the user manager class that comes with the ASP.NET Identity package. We can do things also like send somebody a text message. It's got SMS properties built in. So it's very, very robust, this manager. This will basically handle any kind of security we want to implement.
SMS, does that send text using mail? Or does that send a proper SMS?
I think it sends a proper SMS.
Really?
Wow.
I haven't played with it, so it's built into the class, though. Feel free to play around with that. So, and in our result object that we get back when we call create, so we basically just have the succeeded property, which is a Boolean, and we have the errors collection.
Oh, I meant.
You can use an email. You want to use email address as the username? Yep, you can do that. All we would need, so if we were going to do that, let's say we put an email box on our form, then we would just have user.email equals txt. Right? So if you wanted the email as well, the user object has an email property built in. So you would just put an email text box on your form and populate that property before you called create. Same with phone number. It also has a phone number.
Nice.
Okay. So that's built in. We also need to change our label. They called these LBL, they called it status message. Our label's called LBL status.
And that goes, the status message goes at the top?
We put it at the top. Now eventually, we're going to change this line of code. If our registration's successful, we're not going to print out a success message. What should we do after a registration is done? Yeah, we could either redirect them to login, or even simpler, what would be even easier from a user point of view? Yeah, let's log them in automatically and take them off. Ultimately, when someone signs up or logs in, we're going to want to take them here. Whoops. Let's take them to a main menu page. We can do that automatically when they register. For now, let's just try and create an account, and we'll deal with the redirect part after. Now, here's where the tutorial differs from what we're going to do. The tutorial wants us to set up a local data store. So this will create a local MDF file inside of our app data folder. Well, we don't need to set up a data store. We already have a data store. We have an Azure database. So we want to connect to our Azure database instead. We're going to need to make two changes to our connection in our web.config. Okay. By default, the ASP.NET Identity package looks for a connection that's called default connection, which is what we're already using. So I had assumed we would be able to use our existing connection string in web.config because it already has the name the package is looking for. One small problem, which we can work around. So we already have a connection called default connection. The problem is we use the Entity Framework Designer to generate it, and when we do that, it adds all this other code that the Entity Framework uses, but the ASP.NET Identity package, it doesn't want that stuff. It simply wants to know what's the provider, is it SQL Server or something else, and what's the host, database name, username, and password. So it wants a simplified version of this connection string. And it wants that one to be called default connection. So what we're going to do is rename this one and then do a replace in our application, and then we'll add a simplified connection string called default connection, because that's what our package wants to use. Okay? It's not a glamorous solution, but it will work. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is open up web.config.
Is there a glamorous solution?
That's what you can find out. You can report back to us next week. Thanks, Tyler. Thanks for volunteering for that. I appreciate that. Okay.
Glamour shot.
So all we're going to do,
Visual Studio.
so I'll just open up my courses page for a second here, anywhere we're using it. Oh, actually, we called it COMP2007 entities. Okay.
Somewhere in there that references.
Yeah. You know what? We just have to make two small changes. We don't even need to find and replace. Okay. So in here, in my connection string, I'm just going to call this one default connection EF. You can give it any name you want. Something other than default connection. Okay. EF standing for indicating that's the one Entity Framework generated.
What do we have to change?
Wouldn't that, yeah, wouldn't that
We've-
be your other stuff?
Hang on. It's only in one file. The other place we have to change it, now you could do a find.
Your model.
If we go to model and expand our model and expand Contoso model, this is where it specifies. Nope, sorry, it doesn't. Where am I?
Context.
Yes, it's in the context in here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Thanks,
of course.
Sam. So in models, Contoso model context, in this class, Contoso model.context.cs, on line 20, it says name equals default connection. That's where it's pointing to our connection string in web.config. So if we just change this here to say default connection EF,
So the one that we're adding is going to be called default connection?
yes.
Okay, because my other one is just COMP2007.
Okay, if yours isn't called default connection, don't change anything.
Yes.
Okay, so now if I recompile, everything should still work as it did before.
Just those two changes?
Just those two changes. So I just added EF onto the end of my connection string. Rest of my application still works. Okay. So I changed the connection string here in my model.context.cs, and I made it match the new name of my connection string in web.config.
Why did you do that exactly?
Nice.
Because ASP.NET Identity looks for a connection string that's called default connection. And it won't like all of this extra stuff in here related to our model.
So do we have to make another default connection string?
Visual Studio, we're going to make one? Yeah. Okay, here's how we do it. So in your web.config now, type in add name equals default connection. Okay. The provider name property we need to set, and that's system.data.sql client. That simply means it's an SQL server connection. And then we'll set the connection string property. Visual Studio, we can copy and paste this. This will already exist in Visual Studio. To get your base connection string without all of the metadata and model stuff, if you click on your Server Explorer, so click on Server Explorer on the left, you'll see your existing data connection. If you right-click that one and choose Properties, the base connection string's right here in the Properties window. So if I just double-click in there beside connection string and copy it, this gives me the connection string here. It's this whole value. Yep. So just paste that in. And you'll have to put your password in. Your password will be replaced with asterisks. So just paste it in. So this is the simplified version. It just has the server name, the database name, the username, user ID, and password.
Exactly the same.
So just replace, it's the same, but without that all that long prefix of the models and the CSDL. That stuff will confuse Entity Framework.
Yeah, it has a log in it still.
Where do you get?
What
Did you go over there?
Yeah.
What else did you change out of the other one?
Okay, hang on just one second. So there is probably a more efficient way of doing it than this. Tyler will enlighten us all next week. He'll just be a little less profane. Okay, so this should be all we need to do. We've installed the package, we've built the register page. Our register page is calling ASP.NET Identity, and we have a connection string called default connection. So, just make sure your solution's compiled, and let's try our register page. So the first thing I'm going to do is just try and sign up this way. I'm just going to put in a 1-character password. Try this on yours.
That's pretty unsecure.
Click register.
25 tries and you'll get your password.
So we haven't added any password rules.
I have. Oh, cool.
The identity package actually enforces that rule automatically. That's the default. You can override that if you want to change it. If I leave out the username, I'll just put in password. So even if I don't check on the front end for a blank username, the identity package will tell me, no, you can't do that.
How do you get those errors about password to pass matching? Is that built in?
You need a compare validator.
Yeah.
Did we do that?
Yes, we did.
Also, I already have an account. I suggest you create an account with the username admin and the password.
Why, so you can actually work stuff.
Well, or at the very least, create an account that you're going to remember, because we're going to keep working with this application the next few weeks. I don't want you to forget your login. So I already have an account called admin. And if I try and create another account with the username admin,
So it checks.
again, it does all this for you. Right? They've built in all of the normal features that an authentication schema is going to need.
Should we make it so that, like, well, I guess it's not really that big a deal, but when you create it successfully, it comes up in the same label, but we have it as like a danger.
Yeah, you know, that's a good point. Sure. That's a very good point, Patrick. So, Patrick doesn't like that this is going to be in red if I get a successful message. Well, we can deal with that. So here, if it succeeds, what could we do instead? Right? We can change the CSS class to label success. Then it'll be green. So the background's red by default, but it's green. And actually here we should, because it will, we should just set it here as well. If we get an error, label danger. Because that class will persist. If we get a success and then an error, it will stay green on the error. So we want to make sure we always change it to red every time there's an error, set it to green every time it's successful. Now it's almost time for us to take a break, but I have to say there's a very obvious question that I'm surprised nobody's asked me yet.
What is it?
You keep making an admin account.
What's your favorite color?
Right. So now it's green, right?
Okay. Yeah, I don't.
Now it's red. Now here's the obvious question. Where the heck is the data stored?
Yeah, right?
I was thinking that, I just didn't want to say it out loud.
It's making a database thing.
Let's go to Server Explorer. Expand your database, your server. Click on Tables.
Oh crap.
Boy.
Oh boy, it's all there.
Wow.
Well, that's rather useful, isn't it?
Look at that.
You would have departments.
So when we try to register, the package actually, rather than first saying does the user exist, it says do the tables even exist? And if the tables don't exist, it actually builds them.
Why is PHP even a thing?
That is solid.
So if you want to look, we're really only using the ASP Net users table. Okay? There's a couple things in here you need to take note of, because you're going to need to know this when you do your assignment. Okay? So it hashes the password for us. It uses a unique security stamp, like a salt value as well. Here are the usernames. We can manage lockouts. It's got fields for phone number and email. But here's the important part. The user IDs are alphanumeric, right? So if in your assignment you want to assign certain data to a user, then your user ID's got to be a varchar field. It won't hold a number, right? This is the unique user ID. Which is also good because it means if we want to attach that onto a link, you don't have to really bother encrypting it because it's already encrypted. Right, which is also useful. So those user IDs are not visible and easy for someone to change or manipulate.
My register's not working.
Is there a way to update, the incompatible SQL server for, is there a way to upgrade that on Visual Studio?
Yeah, there should be.
Saying must be some character.
You can, if you can't access, you can always open up Management Studio and connect your database that way,
Yeah, okay.
or look through Azure.
I can directly open student page without it, right?
Well, yeah, we haven't secured these pages. All we've done is create a registration, so the users are not connected. We still don't have any login or any authentication. We will, right? Like here's students, if I grab that URL, if I log out and try and go back there, I'm logged out. We haven't done this yet. First we got to be able to sign users up. Then we have to be able to log in, and then at the end we can control who has access to those pages. There's no point building that until we have a login, right? So this package does a lot of stuff. It also has the tables for managing roles, different logins, etc. So if we want to build a more complex authorization schema, we can do it. Okay, so that's step one. So we're going to take a pause. When we come back, we're going to build login. Once we're going to have to add more packages. Once we can log in, we're going to have to be able to dynamically control the menu and then control access to different pages of the site. But we will take a 20-minute break